Hello and welcome back to Just Another F1 podcast here on Apex Motorsport. My name is Richard Smyth and this is Season 2, Episode 2. And for this one, I'm delighted to have back on the channel accredited Formula 1 photographer Craig Evans. Craig, thank you for joining me, and how excited are you to see Formula 1 back at the Bahrain Grand Prix?
Oh, it's great, isn't it? I can't wait to see cars back out on track. It's been the shortest off season I think we've ever seen, but it's still too long, isn't it? We want to see F1 all the time. I can't wait for this season. I think testing was the wonderful aperitif this season needed. It's like, oh, this is what you could have, but you've got to wait another 2 weeks. So yeah, I can't wait to see another season of Formula One get underway in the next 2 weeks.
As you said, we've just had testing, but last Saturday we learnt of the sad passing of Murray Walker, the voice of Formula 1 for so many. Well, he wasn't commentating races when I started watching the sport. I would often watch old races and enjoy the enthusiastic, inspirational, chaotic yet factual voice of Murray Walker. The way he united the Formula 1 paddock and fans around the world with their tributes just shows how respected he was by so many. Our thoughts are with his friends and family at this time. We usually start these podcasts by playing a little game, but today we're just going to talk about Murray Walker instead. So firstly, Craig, just what is your favourite memory of Murray Walker?
I think the beauty of Murray Walker, and we saw that when sadly the news came out, was the fact that he didn't have social media at all. Yet the weekend it was flooded with Murray Walker clips, and I think it's just brilliant to see. I mean, obviously I've done a little bit of commentary myself, and he was an inspiration. He was an inspiration to a lot of people, and I think his style, his enthusiasm, his excitement for the sport, it's just, you don't see that anymore. And I think Damon Hill summed it up perfectly when he said, modern Formula One hasn't lost anything with Murray's passing because he wasn't involved in the sport too much. But what it's incredible just to see everyone talking about Murray and to see everyone talking about what he loved doing. And there's so many iconic clips. I mean, the favourite of mine is the British Touring Car Championship with John Cleland, the double champion, overtaking a Vauxhall and giving them the finger, and Murray Walker going, "I'm going for first," he says. And the Pizza Hut advert with Damon Hill, I think I couldn't pick one. And I know, Richard, you've got a few favourite clips, but there's just so many fantastic moments that we should celebrate with Murray Walker. And I think that's the beautiful thing we've seen this weekend is everyone is celebrating his life and what an incredible life he led.
There's one thing that he would always do, and that's make a dull race exciting. I think, if he was still commentating modern day Formula 1, France 2019, which was probably the worst race I've seen in a long time, he would make that sound like the race in Germany a few years ago, the wet weather, because he's so enthusiastic and makes everything sound amazing. A clip that stands out for me is nothing to do with Formula 1 related, but when he was speaking to Jeremy Clarkson and he said that the one sport he would love to commentate on was snooker, and Jeremy handed him a microphone and he got up, and it was fantastic.
It was brilliant
to see. And I think he's just so many, I think they call Murrayisms, where just random mistakes or quotes and stuff that he says that just modern day, when we see crafting stuff commentating for Sky Sports, people slate him across social media for calling an AlphaTauri, Toro Rosso, or a Racing Point last year, Force India. But when Murray done it, everyone sort of enjoyed it and knew exactly what he was talking about. I think for me, my favourite quote from him was probably, "There's nothing wrong with this car apart from it's on fire." Because
yeah, brilliant.
It's factually correct, because just apart from the car being on fire, there's nothing wrong with it. But it's just the way he says it, and yeah, we've definitely lost that in modern day Formula 1. It's more factual and less a fun, enjoyable commentary style. But his voice, it was just a fantastic commentator, and his knowledge of motorsport in general was just incredible.
It was just his love for the sport. I mean, he used to commentate every race standing up. and just by standing up, you can get the undulation in your voice. You can get those different. You're not cramped up, sat down. I think it's stuff like that. It's just fantastic. I mean, Murray loved the sport. I'm fortunate enough that I never got to meet him because he was always one of those people I'd love to have met. But he loved Formula One. He loved motorsport. He loved anything on four wheels, and that showed through his commentary. And I think, like you mentioned, it is kind of an act that we've lost a little bit in commentary. The real excitement. I mean, there are some other great commentators out there nowadays, but no, I think it is sad. But the Murrayisms will hopefully go on forever because they're captured, and I for one will always look back on Murray Walker clips to inspire myself if I get stuck on commentating.
I think one of the nicest things as well is that, at least in the commentary side, everyone in that Formula One paddock will have been inspired him, if not worked with him. We've seen Martin Brundle obviously work with him at ATV, and Crafty said he was the first person he phoned up when he got the job at Sky. But even the Ted Kravitz working with the commentary team in the background, that's stuff that I didn't know, and it's nice for them sort of to share their stories, because he was mentoring them, he was inspiration for them all. And while no one I think a key reason why we're seeing the commentary the style it is today, no one wants to copy him because they don't want to be compared to him, because no one can be compared to Murray Walker. He's just a legend in sport, and the way that he commentated on all motorsport, I've seen a clip the past few days, the Ulster Grand Prix, the motorcycling race, it's an event that is fairly well attended, but in Northern Ireland, motorsport's a big thing, and nowadays you don't have, you can't see Crafty or Alex Jakes coming to commentate on the Northwest 200, the Ulster Grand Prix, because you just don't have that, where you have the local motorcyclists, people like that. It's just fantastic, and he never wants to be out of the comedy box. He always wanted to be there at some event commentating, and it's just his work ethic is incredible. He'd be definitely sadly missed, and I think the last sort of memory I have of him was 2020 70th anniversary Grand Prix, when he was on speaking to Simon Laserby and co at before the race, which it was great to have, because I think that just showed that despite Formula One moving on since he retired in 2001, I know he'd been back a few times, it was just, everyone knew him as Mr. Formula One, and he was
just the voice of Formula One.
Yeah, I think I'd wish that I sort of heard him commentating when I was growing up. Obviously I didn't, and I've just, since I got into Formula One, been used to Crafty or Ben Edwards, Alex Jakes. So I never got to experience that in the live race, which I wish I did. But it's nice to have clips to look back on, because he's a legend of the sport and will be definitely sadly missed.
Yeah, he will indeed, and he forever will be the voice of Formula One. Luckily, that's the beauty of modern technology, is we've got all of those moments captured, and we can go back and we can look at them, we can enjoy them, we can talk to our grandkids about, this was Murray Walker, this was one of the biggest reasons why I got into doing what I was doing. And that is one of the beauties of technology in the way it is now. And he will be sadly missed. And like you say, the thoughts go to his friends and family. But I think the whole motorsport world lost a little bit of something when Murray Walker passed at the weekend. And yeah, it's quite sad, really.
So let's move on to testing now, and based on the 3 days action in Bahrain, Red Bull and McLaren look like they're favourites for the title, while Mercedes are fighting with Aston Martin for 10th place. But we all know that is testing, and we have to throw in the usual disclaimer that testing does mean very little, and it's highly unlikely that we'll see Mercedes and Aston Martin fighting for 10th place, really. We're going to start off chatting about the reigning world champions Mercedes, who looked like they were struggling. We really don't know what's going on there. They have a filming day. It was yesterday for you listening now. Craig, do you think Mercedes are hiding something, doing the usual sandbagging that we've seen in the past, or do you actually think they're really struggling this season?
I think if we look at the past few seasons, Mercedes in testing have always never shown their full hand, and I think this year's another prime example of that. I mean, they completed the lowest running of any of the teams with 304 laps. You don't go from the front of the grid to the back of the grid that quickly, and I'm quietly confident Mercedes are still going to be out front. The gap will have closed, yes, but I do think there was a significant amount of sandbagging going on from the Mercedes. I mean, it was just the onboards. You looked at Hamilton's onboards, and he was so like aggressive with the car, and that's just not his style of driving. He was flooring the throttle coming out of corners. He was late on the brakes. I think Mercedes were testing the limits of grip on that car. They weren't testing its overall speed. They were testing its limits, which is what we saw a lot of with them coming out and oversteering into corners, and just it looked very untidy, which I didn't expect from Mercedes.
They have this filming day. It was for Tuesday. We're recording this on the Tuesday, so it's already happened. They had 100 kilometers of filming footage. There's some chat before they started the session where it looks like they were going to be trying new parts and really using this as sort of an excuse to get back out on track, because usually after they launch the car, they do a shakedown in Silverstone, and they didn't do that this year. Do you think there was any possibility that this car just wasn't ready for testing as much as they would like?
I think they're leaving the shakedown until after testing didn't help, because had they have run the shakedown, they'd have found the gearbox issue, which of course meant Bottas only got 6 laps in the first morning, and all of those other kind of little technical niggles they had throughout that first day. But I don't know, if to me Mercedes don't make mistakes without a valid reason, and I think there is a reason they decided to run their media day after testing. And I think that's something we probably won't find out about until a bit later on in the season. But yeah, they've got their media day, as you said, 100 kilometers on testing tyres. So they won't be able to get any aero data, but they'll still be testing things, and they'll still be tinkering away, I think. But I definitely think Mercedes are not in as a dire situation as the media and everyone else would like them to be, I think.
It has appeared that this filming day was just a filming day, because there was trucks and stuff going slow on the track filming, and really just tracking the car going round. There's also the chat about Red Bull, one of the competitors. The car, there's very minor changes going into 2021 from 2020, where the cars remain mostly the same, but this aero, and Ted Kravitz pointed out in the test notebook that it's like a cheese shaped cutout. He also mentioned to Christian Horner that the car for Red Bull get their downforce from a higher rake. Do you think Mercedes are feeling the effect of their sort of aerodynamic advantage is being cut because of this?
Yeah, I think the key thing with this year is the rear of the car, and how quite a few of the cars this year have gone over to the high rake system, where the rear of the car sits higher unloaded. And obviously Red Bull and AlphaTauri both ran that system last year. So you're already seeing the advantages of that, because they're used to this high rake system, whereas Mercedes were a lot more of the lower rake. So were McLaren, to be fair. And McLaren have completely redeveloped their floor. Their diffuser is getting a lot of attention because it's significantly different from everyone else's. But Mercedes did say that it would hit them the hardest, because that's where a lot of their aerodynamic gain is, the rear of the car. But it's going to be interesting to see, come qualifying in a couple of weeks' time, whether it is actually cost them, or they've managed to completely redevelop and reiterate that floor. Because the squiggly bits on the side of the floor that they didn't show when they released the car, they're there for a reason. I don't believe they've got the floor fundamentally wrong. People like James Allison and the team he's got behind him won't be making that level of, I don't think, that level of a mistake. But yeah, it's going to be it's going to be interesting to see. And as I say, I'm pretty confident they're still out front. The gap just will be a little bit smaller.
Do you think if Mercedes look back at this data and they realise that they have got the car very wrong, do you see any possibility of them turning up in Bahrain in 2 weeks' time with a completely different floor, different aerodynamic parts, just to really trial it? Because if they're not going to be at the front with the current car, is it worth the risk to try something new, at least for one race?
The problem with if you redesign the floor, you then have to redesign the rear wing end plates, the DRS, the engine cover. It's not so much a quick fix of let's just slap another floor on it and hopefully it'll fix all our problems. They'll stick to their guns. They'll show up with what we saw at testing, if not a few minor tweaks here and there. But yeah, they'll stick to their guns and for some reason we see this every year that the media gets so irate about Red Bull are there, Red Bull are faster than Mercedes, we're going to have a good season. And then come the first race, Mercedes turn up and they've got 0.6 on everyone else. It's happened for the past 4 years, and for some reason, we still for it. It's quite funny, really.
Yeah, you're correct what you're saying. Mercedes always do turn up and be the strongest team. Although something this year does feel a little bit different, but then again, it's Mercedes. The cars is mostly the same, so don't expect them to have that huge drop off that sort of everyone's portraying, because based on what we've seen in testing, they are potentially down there with with Williams and Haas fighting for 10th place, which isn't going to be possible. We've seen Ferrari fall off, but not Mercedes aren't going to do something that's even more dramatic than that. Their closest challengers are Red Bull, and they did have a strong testing session. The data that has come out, and I think Mercedes has said it, that Red Bull looked to be the quickest team, at least on race pace. Craig, do you think this is just a final probably word Mercedes? Do you think this is sort of them just getting the excuses out of the way at the moment and trying to put the pressure off them, and then, as I said, they'll turn up the Bahrain and clean everyone by 6 tenths of the lap in qualifying?
Well, I think Red Bull, there's no arguing it, Red Bull's test this year was the strongest pre-season test they've had for a long time. The car looks stable. They've got rid of the wobbly rear end. They've really, really nailed down the... I think where did they spend their tokens? They spent their tokens on the rear suspension. They've redeveloped their rear suspension to a system similar to Mercedes. And they've focused on the side plates, haven't they? It's like the winglets on the side of the car. But Red Bull are, no question of a doubt, gonna be strong this year. They've got what I think one of the strongest lineups on the grid in Verstappen and Perez. And the beauty of that is Mercedes won't be able to bully Red Bull into a strategy anymore. Whereas last year it was Hamilton, Bottas and Verstappen. Mercedes could use Bottas to manipulate Verstappen's strategy. This year, I am quietly confident Perez will be up there. And I will go as far as saying that Perez will give Max a run for his money this year. Because he's so good on the tyres. He is so good at keeping the tyre life in the tyre. You saw that over testing. The amount of times Perez was fastest in the second and third sector. Max was quickest in the first and halfway through the second, and then dropped off in the third. We're already seeing Perez come forward with his special bag of talent in just tyre preservation, and I think that's going to allow Red Bull to be a lot more aggressive out on track this year, which is something to definitely look forward to.
Yeah, I think Perez, he definitely impressed me over testing. Do you think there's a possibility that him having the background at now Aston Martin, last year was Racing Point, who obviously had the pink Mercedes that have close links to Mercedes in certain parts? Do you think he was able to bring some of that knowledge to Red Bull and help them out and potentially give Red Bull that little bit more of an insight into what Mercedes are doing, so they can either copy or just go the complete opposite if they feel that's the correct direction to go in?
It would have definitely been a factor, I reckon. The fact that he like you say, he'd been with a Mercedes-based team. So he knows the power unit, he knows how it works, he knows its modes. Obviously that will have changed for this year because quite a few of the teams have change the engine and engine modes for this year. But it will be interesting to see Perez in with a Red Bull, because I think he is quick. There's no question of a doubt. He's very fast, and that was one of the main reasons why Red Bull have got him in there. But it's going to be a good season for that battle and that battle alone. I would like to think that he can give Max a run for his money as well, but only time's going to tell on something like that, I reckon.
There's another team who is expected to probably close the gap on both Red Bull and Mercedes, and that is McLaren, who obviously have the Mercedes engines for this season. It was a good test for them. Craig, what was your first impressions to seeing McLaren and Mercedes, the McLaren-Mercedes package back out on track?
To me, McLaren were the most impressive team. New power unit, completely new driver, completely new rear floor and rear diffuser, whole new package of upgrades, and it just worked straight out the box. Like, it was completely different to the whole Honda fiasco a couple of years ago, which I'm sure we all remember and frown upon nowadays. But I don't know if you agreed with me, Richard, but McLaren were just so impressive. I mean, they weren't high up on the lap count. They were what were they? Seventh lowest team on the lap count, only managing 327 laps. But I don't know about you, but McLaren, for me, were and are the team to watch this year. I reckon they've got some seriously good results in that car this year, with that driver lineup as well.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that. The whole dynamic between Ricciardo and Norris will be quite exciting, because obviously we've seen the friendship between Sainz and Norris, whereas Ricciardo and Norris, you would expect them to be a lot more jokey and stuff, but that's the whole the PR media side, getting the stuff out in the social media channels. But they've already said that they're not really going to be trying to focus on that aspect, because it's something that's been said numerous times that teams, parents, the drivers get on well until they're fighting for podiums and wins, and that's something I could definitely see McLaren doing this season. If Mercedes are struggling and maybe are falling back a bit, Red Bull have closed up, and there's a few tangles up front, a couple of collisions, McLaren could be there to get the podium, even a few race wins, which would be,
all it's going to take this year is, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but all it's going to take this year is for the front four to have a bad day. McLaren will be there. They will be fighting to get on that podium, if not for the race win. So I think if any team has a chance of winning from the midfield, it's McLaren this year. They look super strong.
They are definitely. They're one of the strongest teams in the grid. There's something in the back of the car that has caused quite a bit of talk amongst Formula 1 fans and the paddock as well. Is this diffuser? Could we see something special here? Something that could we see that maybe like a Braun 2009 style story where a team comes out of nowhere and claims the championship?
I don't think we're going to see them claim the championship, but I think they have got a silver bullet in that diffuser. They have gone a completely different direction to everyone else, and that's quite clear to see when you see the car out on track. So it's going to be great to see if it's worked for them, because I really hope it does, because McLaren have really bounced back, and they've gone from the lows of the Honda era a couple of years ago to third in the Constructors last year. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, the way that the whole team, and I've got to say, it's partly due to Andreas Seidel. He's a magnificent team boss. He has a massive reputation in endurance racing and GT racing, and he's obviously brought that over to McLaren, and it's completely transformed the team. It's a completely different team to the one it was a couple of years ago. But I think their flaw, I hope they've got a silver bullet there, and I think they have done, because the pace looked good from Ricciardo. The morning session, topping the first two morning sessions, and then I think, where was he, third or fourth in the final one, because he ran in the evening. But yeah, it's going to be close, and that midfield battle is incredibly tight this year. So I hope they've got a silver bullet.
Something that Daniel Ricciardo brings to the team is obviously race win experience, and he's also got multiple podiums as well. he has that knowledge obviously from him being at Renault last season here now Alpine, but also back to Red Bull. And although them cars are a couple of years old, do you think that knowledge of the way Red Bull work and the setup and how the cars are developed, along with one of their midfield competitors now in Alpine, do you think that will really just help them push even further forward? And maybe it could be a case of sort of where Red Bull have been in the past, where it was Mercedes and Ferrari, and then Red Bull were back a bit, then there's another gap to the midfield. Do you think you could see that with McLaren maybe being that third team this year?
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think McLaren are going to cement themselves in as the third team, and as you say, the reason Ricciardo's won races, he's won 7 in his career so far. So he knows how to win a race. He knows that race winning mentality, how to manage a race. He's going to be key for McLaren this year, like he was for Renault last year when they secured their 2 or 3 podiums. He's going to be key for that team, and I think Norris is going to learn a shed load of stuff from him.
Yeah, I think Norris has improved. Last 2 seasons I've been seeing him, and he really come into Formula One as sort of a driver who some people thought wasn't ready. He obviously came in the same batch as Alex Albon and George Russell, and it was always a thing of people were saying that Russell wasn't ready, and then people were saying, well, if Lando's ready, Russell's ready. How impressed have you been with the way Norris has come into McLaren, hasn't just improved season upon season?
There's no question about it. The sport has some amazing young British talent coming up through the ranks. I think Norris, Russell, Albon, Callum Ilott are all part of that group. But Norris has been... His first season was hit and miss, I'll admit that. His first season was a bit, I'm not sure. But his second and third have been fantastic. Last year, picking up that first podium in Austria for the first race, that was brilliant. He just seems to come alive when it's on the line. You see that develop through his racecraft. He is there. He's constantly causing trouble for the bigger teams. It's the same as Sainz was last year, and I think that's where that kind of driver and the package McLaren have works so well, because he's not scared to stick it up the inside on a tight apex somewhere against a Mercedes or a Red Bull. He's there to race, and he's there to race hard, and that's what I love about Lando Norris. And not being funny, he was testing on Saturday. A week earlier, he was doing a charity Minecraft stream on Twitch. It's just brilliant, and I think he's great for the sport. He's a breath of fresh air. He's not this elite... Well, he is an elite athlete, but he's not this elite athlete that hangs out in Monaco and does all of that stuff. He's just launched Quadrant, his own esports side team. It's just brilliant. I think Norris is fantastic, and I think all of the young drivers that have come into F1 have just given it that injection F1 needed to bring a few more younger audiences in and just get people excited about racing again.
Yeah, I have to agree with that 100%. We'll move on to our next team now, and it is Aston Martin, who last season competed as Racing Point. We've had so many names before that, but now they're Aston Martin. The British Racing Green is back on track. Greg, just say, how excited are you to see Aston Martin back in Formula One after it was 61 years away?
Oh, it's fantastic. Aston Martin, an iconic British brand, back on the Formula One grid. It's great to see. What wasn't great to see was their first test. It was a bit rocky, but hopefully they'll sort that out. And to be honest, it caught me by surprise, because had you have asked me Friday morning before the cars went out on track, I would have said Aston Martin was your third best team straight away. The way the car was presented, the way the team conducted themselves, the way they've built up and got the excitement going for the car launch. I thought that was brilliant. They did it so well, and then it got out on track and it just never seemed to catch, really.
No, it was a disappointing sort of test for them. because he didn't get as much like running time as they would have hoped, and I think Sebastian Vettel said that he would have needed about another 100 laps in the car to feel comfortable. Do you think sort of his experience as being a four-time world champion will help him, compromise where he hasn't had them extra 100 laps? Do you think he'll still be okay come the first race in Bahrain?
He'll still be okay, yeah, but he will. The team will hurt from missing that many laps. Vettel, over the 3 days and the 12 hours of on-track time he had, completed 60 laps. That's really, really low. When you consider Kimi Räikkönen on that final day did 165 laps in 8 hours, nearly 3 race distances, and Vettel just scraped 1 race distance over 3 days. It's going to hurt them because they just haven't been able to run the car. But to me, the more concerning thing with Aston Martin is the Mercedes unreliability. The gearbox issues, the engine issues, the hydraulic issues. I think that's going to be the downfall of the Mercedes power unit this year. I think they're going to struggle from what we've seen. I could be completely wrong, and I probably am. But they needed more on-track running. Like, a lot more on-track running. Especially in Vettel's side of the garage.
I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but out of all the teams in the grid, 4 of the bottom 5, in terms of how many laps were completed, were powered by Mercedes. It was the entire field is powered by Mercedes, were in the bottom 5. Do you think could be something more there than just a couple issues, that it could be a bigger problem than the Mercedes engine itself?
I don't think so, because McLaren didn't do a usual testing plan. Usually there's a lot more long running, and I mentioned this to you before we started the podcast, that for a pre-season test it was actually pretty boring. There wasn't much going on compared to Barcelona. I mean, Barcelona, they used to run 250 laps a day. There was a lot more running in Barcelona than there was in Bahrain. But all of the Mercedes teams didn't run a normal testing plan. Mercedes definitely didn't. McLaren were very minimal on their running. I don't think any of their drivers got over 100 laps in a day. Williams with George Russell and Nicholas Latifi did in the final 2 days. But then they had Roy Nissany in the car on the first day. And then Aston Martin were hampered by unreliability. So it was an interesting test for them. And I'm sure the Mercedes power unit guys would have been watching that with bated breath, because that's not the kind of numbers they should have been looking at. But then equally, I can't see it being a problem. I mean, the Mercedes power unit has been solid for 4 or 5 years now? I can't see it all of a sudden falling apart at the wayside. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see on the season on that one. But it was lower for Mercedes powered cars. Like, a lot lower than it has been in the past few years.
Yeah, it would definitely be a surprise if we start to see all the Mercedes powered cars just dropping back a bit, like we've seen Ferrari last year. But from the way we've seen testing, if we're reading into testing, it could mean an even bigger downfall, which is very unlikely, and it is only testing at the end of the day. The next team, Alpine. I think I've called them Alpine the last few podcasts, so I do apologise for that. It is Alpine. Fernando Alonso back in Formula 1. Just Craig, I know you're a huge fan of Fernando Alonso.
Matador returns.
How excited are you to see him back?
Oh, I'm so happy to see Nando back. I am so happy to see him back on the grid. And the thought I might be able to, hopefully get some photography done of one of my idols in the next 2 years. I'm buzzing for that. I can't wait to see him back on track.
How would you rate sort of his performance back in the car? Because we know he had the cycling accident a few weeks ago, and I think he's got titanium plates in his jaw for this season.
Yeah,
he
2 titanium plates.
He was back on track, and he was putting in very, very good lap times. Do you think that maybe that the cycling incident will maybe have affected him coming in, or are you just really impressed with what he's achieved in his first time back in the car in a while?
Well, I think alongside Alonso, you've got to say Alpine are one of the underdogs this year. They had a really solid test. Great reliability, showed some good pace. Ocon looks quick in the car as well. I'd definitely say as a team, Alpine are one of the underdogs this year. Alonso's Alonso. It's what I think Martin Brundle was saying. You could put a pound coin on the apex of turn 4. Every single time Alonso would hit it. He's just incredible in the car.
Esteban Ocon is obviously Alonso's teammate for the season. He sort of went under the radar a bit in testing because I think all the focus was on Alonso. Do you think Ocon looks solid, or do you think he's maybe a bit off the pace from Fernando?
I don't think he's Fernando pace. He's very close to it, but he's not that level of consistency. And I think that's one of the biggest tools that Alonso has. Is he's just consistent. He constantly hammers in solid lap times. Ocon he'll learn a lot from Alonso, and Ocon is a quick driver. He doesn't get into the Mercedes Junior program for no reason. It'll be an interesting year with Ocon and Alonso because I think Alonso's going to edge him, but I'm not sure. And I think Ocon will take the fight to him. And as I said earlier, I think the Alpine team as a whole looks solid. They're definitely my underdogs for the season.
Alpine were the fourth best team according to the amount of laps they've done, 386. They don't have to focus on providing engines to any other teams this year. Obviously with McLaren moving to Mercedes. Do you think that will really help Alpine, maybe just focus solely on themselves as a team and really do what they want and push that engine as far as they can without helping their midfield competitors?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an aspect of that. The fact that McLaren have now gone to Mercedes power, which of course leaves Alpine. Would it still be Renault powered, the Alpine?
Yes, I think officially it's Renault powered.
So it's Alpine Renault.
Yes,
because that was what I was wondering, if it would be an Alpine or an Alpine Renault.
I think they're Renault powered.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think they've got that focus on themselves. They can just knuckle down, get on with it. And I think that they're in for a good season. As I say, the midfield is probably the tightest battle I can remember for points. It's going to be really challenging this year.
They also have one of the nicest liveries on the grid this year. Do you agree with that, or do you think another team's is far nicer?
Yeah, I would go as far as saying the Alpine's the best livery on the grid this year. Talking of liveries, actually, with the Aston Martin, were you disappointed when you saw it on track?
It depends what light it was on. Sometimes
Exactly.
it looked very dark. Sometimes it looked one of the nicest cars I've ever seen. It really just depends what way it was shown.
To me, the Aston Martin looked fantastic when they revealed it, and then it got out on track, and you're like, oh, it just looks a bit like the Merc, doesn't it? There's nothing. But no, the Alpine, to me, Alpine is the best livery. Secondly, followed by probably the McLaren and then the Williams.
See, that's interesting because I'm not a big fan of the Williams car. I don't know why. It just looks too much, and the McLaren wouldn't be high up my list either.
So we have a complete disagreement there.
Yeah. See, I'm a big fan of the new Ferrari, and I know it's sort of quite controversial because of the green sponsor, but I quite like it. And then I think for me, second would be the Haas if we ignore the Russian flag across it and look at purely as a colour scheme.
But hey, Richard, that's not the Russian flag on that.
Oh,
Haas.
that's very true.
It's
actually
not the Russian flag. It's purely coincidental, that.
Yeah. Oh yes. It was actually interesting to see the Haas, the sort of colours they run, because it seems to be a lot of the team wearing stuff is very like blue, and it's very not like Haas. There's too many blue coloured cars in the grid this year. But we'll move on to a team that I like the livery of, Ferrari. I don't think if someone said to us this time last year that would be chatting about Ferrari being way down the grid going into the second season. Can you see them making a miraculous recovery and potentially taking the fight to Mercedes, or is that just wishful thinking at this moment of time?
No, not at all. I think Ferrari are still in. They're going to have a tough season. The SF21, it just doesn't look like a great race car. They were struggling with coming out of corners. It was oversteering a bit. Sainz's lap on the last day, which put him fourth, was good. But I just can't see Ferrari being back up there, to be honest. What about you? Do you reckon they can turn it around and fight for wins?
I wouldn't go as far as saying wins. I could see them possibly scraping a podium if there's a very dramatic race. I think they could be. I'd say they could maybe be challenging for fourth, potentially battling with Aston Martin. It really depends how much gains they've made with this new engine and sort of the dynamic between Leclerc and Sainz. Because they struggled, and I think if they're battling the midfield, Sainz's experience of being in the midfield will help there, because I think that's why Vettel struggled quite a bit, because he was that used to being out front. I can't see them going on to be championship winners or regular race winners. It is a tough one because Ferrari, they shouldn't be where they are. They should be fighting at the front, and do you think they might be putting all their hope into 2022 and maybe going for the championship then?
The amazing thing with me is with Ferrari is how Binotto is still in that lead role.
Very true.
When you think about what they did to Arriva Bene, they came second 3-4 years in a row. Sacked Arriva Bene, brought in Binotto, and since then they've not really. If anything, they've massively gone backwards. And I say none of that as just to slander Ferrari and stuff like that, but it is a bit strange how they kept on, and it's nice to see at the end of the day that they're not just had a bad season, go on, get rid of him, get another one in, repeat and rinse and repeat next year. But they've got another tough season in, and I think it will be incredibly optimistic to say they'll solve their problems by the end of the year.
I think probably what Ferrari were sort of hoping on was for the regulations, the 2022 regulations, were brought in place in 2021 when they're meant to. Maybe last year there's a shift in focus maybe towards the 2021 car, the new regulations, and they sort of got caught out by everyone else focusing on the 2020 car instead of for the new generation of cars. I think I agree. So
there was that whole FIA dossier that came out about how apparently Ferrari weren't allowed to run the engine as high as they have been last year, because that was part of their punishment, and how they've not been able to run the same levels of fuel. I mean, none of that is actually confirmed from an FIA source. But that, to me, would have been interesting last year, because Ferrari completely imploded last year. The start of the season, they were nowhere.
Yeah, I think there's something more to that, because you don't go from having one of the best engines in the grid to dropping that far back. Although if we see that with Mercedes this year, it might not be as big of a surprise because it did happen to Ferrari. But there's something that was, I don't know if it was being covered up or it was a settlement between them that was kept private, but it just seems a little suspicious that, given the people involved with with the FIA and stuff and the stewards, that maybe there's something more here to protect Ferrari and keep them in the sport, because we know they've threatened to quit in the past.
That's definitely something I think that's come into it, and I think protecting Ferrari is an important thing. But should we let them get away with blatantly cheating and then not revealing what they actually did? No, I don't think we should. I think the problem Ferrari have got is it's quite clear they were blatantly cheating with their engine for a good 2 or 3 years. Because what was it? It was Belgium last year. In the first sector alone, we consider Belgium sector 1 is effectively one corner. It's La Source. Belgium sector 1, they were 3 seconds slower through that first sector, and it's just other than that, it's full throttle. So there's a big difference in the way the cars were running last year and the year before. But coming back to this year, I think they've hailed their engine upgrade as massive and it's going to make changes. But I think we're going to see that power wasn't their only problem last year. As Vettel will tell you, that SF90 was a dog to drive. It just wasn't a pleasant car. Leclerc even wasn't keen on it. And I think Ferrari putting all their eggs in the basket of we've got better power unit is great. It'll help. It won't solve the problem though.
Yeah, they just have to look at Williams from last year. They had probably one of the best power units in the grid, yet they were still at the back because power isn't everything. And given that the way some of the tracks are, sometimes the power doesn't really make too much of a difference because you can't go full throttle for most of the lap.
Well,
anyway,
Monaco.
Yeah, Monaco's a good example of that. Another team that it looks strong was the team that put in the most laps across the 3 days was AlphaTauri. We say joint first with 422. Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda, probably one of the more exciting lineups in the grid. Definitely very youthful and I got a lot of potential there. Craig, what did you make of AlphaTauri over the weekend?
Very strong test. I think they've got an absolute star in Yuki Tsunoda. He was impressive considering it was only his second or third run out in an F1 car. Obviously, Gasly is an excellent leading midfield driver, and I think that's where AlphaTauri are going to be this year. They're going to be fighting for those good chunks of points in the midfield. They were the only team last year to get into Q3 in every qualifying session. That says something. And I'm not too sure about you, but for me, Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly that's a feisty lineup.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited about this lineup. Obviously, everyone knows Pierre Gasly. We love him here on the channel. And Yuki Tsunoda, I must admit that whenever I heard that he was making a step up, I wasn't overly convinced because I think it's down to Red Bull's decision making in the past, and I thought maybe they're trying to rush him through in order, for Honda to have, a Honda power car to have a Japanese driver in. But he was very impressive, especially on the Sunday. He was going top of the Tybans. He put in some very impressive laps and he got everyone excited. And I think we've now found Martin Brundle's new favourite driver in the grid.
Yeah, so I mean it's understandable. He was battling Max for the top time in that final day. I mean, you could ignore the fact he was opening his DRS a good 200-300 meters before the line, so it wouldn't have been an official time to be a bit of a Debbie Downer. But no, I think he's quick. He has a talent in the car. He's neat. He's tidy. He's precise. I was properly impressed, and like you, I thought, he's not really ready for F1 because he was only in Japanese Formula 4 2 years ago. I think he's not really ready, and I was proven wrong. So I'm looking forward to seeing him on the grid this year.
I think with Pierre Gasly, he's coming into the season different than the past few because he obviously had a couple of races with Toro Rosso, and then it was a full season there, and then he was brought up to Red Bull, and then he was dropped back, and now he's going into a new season with the same team, and I think that experience he's had, especially because we don't know, Perez could have a nightmare season, or even Verstappen could have a nightmare season, and they're looking to replace him mid-season, and it's unlikely, but they're not going to go for Gasly because they've already made that mistake and they're not want to go back on that.
Tsunoda is the second Red Bull driver.
Yeah, and
you're already seeing that with the way Red Bull have backed him through his career, and I think how long's Perez's contract? It's only a year long, isn't it?
It's only a year, yeah.
I have a funny feeling we could see Yuki Tsunoda in that Red Bull next year, alongside Max Verstappen.
I could definitely see that. I actually hope it won't be the case, because I think, so, he probably, unless he could come out and it could be fighting for podiums every week and impress us all, but I think he really needs 2 seasons in a team to stability for a year to sort of to look back and sort of see where he's improved in, because as much as the Red Bull seat is, everyone wants it because it's a title fighting car. We've seen with Gasly, we've seen Albon. You make that step up and you can struggle, and if you don't put in a good performance, you're out. And well, maybe that's the reason Albon is still with the team's test and reserve, is maybe in case Tsunoda just doesn't impress and might need to take a year out.
No, I do agree with you. I think Red Bull's driver program, its biggest weakness is the fact they don't give drivers enough time. If it was me personally, I'd have given Albon maybe another season, a push. But when you've got the talent of someone like Sergio Perez knocking at your door, you can't just say, he might work out for another year. But we've got this guy that we know is a race winner, ready to go, sit in the car and be quick. That's an interesting point, actually. Who would you have picked for the Red Bull seat for this year? Perez or Albon?
I probably would have picked Perez, given how impressive he was, but I would have tried to keep Albon in some shape or form. Preferably, I would have had him at AlphaTauri, but not in place of Gasly. Tsunoda, if I was in Christian Horner's position, I probably would have let Tsunoda have an extra season in Formula 2, and then you give him a couple of FP1 outings across the season, and then next year make the step up, because I could see Gasly being maybe moved on to another team in order to sort of to fulfill his potential, because he's not going to get that with Red Bull maybe moving.
I was just about to ask you that. Where do you think Gasly's future lies?
Alpine.
To me, it's not in a Red Bull. It's not anything to do with Red Bull.
I think it'll be with Alpine. Potentially maybe replacing Alonso when he retires, or if Ocon can't really impress this season, maybe that's switch next year, because French driver, French team, we've seen when they're in Renault, they don't exactly give the youngsters much of a chance, because they've even signed Daniel Kvyat as their reserve driver when they got Guan Yu Zhou and Christian Lundgaard, who will be in the paddock most weekends.
Yeah, for some reason this year we've seen a step backwards in young driver involvement. I don't know if that's because of the whole the whole situation going on at the minute. But it is a shame to see the involvement of young drivers being stepped back. But to me, when you've got drivers like Callum Ilott and Jack Aitken that are missing out on seats, there's a problem somewhere. But then I don't think there's anyone in F1 that I'd get rid of this year. Like, they're all great drivers and they're all naturally quick. There's the whole Mick Schumacher, Nikita Mazepin argument, which will go on until the cows come home. But it's just, the talent this year is great in Formula One. I reckon it's one of, and interesting, it was a point Crofty made. Can you ever remember a season where there were so many world championships battling for the midfield?
No, it's a very impressive lineup. But one thing I find quite interesting is the teams are taking the reserve driver thing a lot more seriously this year. But there's a lot of drivers who aren't. You usually see reserve drivers being in Formula 2. But Mercedes have got Van Dorn and De Vries in Formula E. They're also potentially trying to get Nico Hülkenberg, which will also go for Aston Martin, and I think McLaren could use him as well. Ferrari have got Callum Ilott, who is in GT this year. He finished runner-up last year in Formula 2.
Just with the McLaren and Mercedes thing, they're sharing reserve drivers this year again.
Yeah, and
they're sharing the same 3 drivers: Hülkenberg, De Vries, and Van Dorn.
And then I'm sure Will Paul di Resta still have super license this year? He was McLaren's reserve for one round last year.
I'm not sure, actually. That's a very good question.
He
We'll have to look at that.
I know he's still racing in Le Mans LMP2, I think. So
yes, he is LMP2 this year.
He might have it. Not too sure if that's a requirement for. I don't know what you need to sort of renew it. But then Mikel Milos with Ferrari, and obviously Alex Albon is with Red Bull. He's doing DTM, and then who else is there? Jack Aitken for Williams. He's not in Formula 2 either. So it seems the Formula 2 grid is quite weak this year in comparison to last year's. And do you think that's reflecting sort of who the teams can choose as their reserve driver?
For some reason, the Formula 2 grid this year has gone very pay driver grid. And I mean that in no nasty way to the drivers that are there, because obviously they are good enough to be there. But there are some questionable driver choices on that grid. And I'm saying that because if you put me in an F2 car, I'd probably not even get out of the pits. I'm saying that purely as a spectator, and I'm not saying I could do a better job at all. But yeah, it's a weird one because we saw it with the season of Nick de Vries. He was the standout that year, and he just ran off with it. Because de Vries, I think, is a fantastic driver. He's brilliant. It's just a shame that this year, I think... we're briefly going on to Formula 2. Who's your favourite for the title this year?
It's a tough one. I think Robert Schwartzman is probably going to be up there, given to be his second year. I think probably if I was choosing now, I would probably say Yuri Vips, because he's got that experience, and this could possibly be one of his final chances to really maybe make a step up to Formula 1, because if he doesn't impress this year, Red Bull will just let go of him.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think Yuri Vips has got a damn good chance of having a very strong season. He's kind of gone under the radar, so it will be interesting to see how he gets on this year.
Yeah, it will be interesting because, as you said, there is a lot of so-called pay drivers. Cause if this was based on performance, I couldn't see Alessio Deleta being in, or Samaya, them sort of drivers being in. Even everyone's favourite Formula 2 driver, Roy Nissany, in the Dams car, well, alongside Marcus Armstrong, who had a very impressive start to the season. Then
Marcus Armstrong is another driver I think is going to have a strong year.
Yeah, I think he needs to work out what went wrong in the second half of last season, and I think probably two drivers that could also be, well, there's a lot of talent within this Formula 2 grid, a lot of people who could win the title, but if you said last season that Mick Schumacher was going to go on and win after sort of struggling his first year, I think everyone was sort of saying Schwartzman was going on to win, and Schumacher sort of come out of nowhere and was so consistent, and that's what won the title.
The consistency won Schumacher that championship last year, 100%.
Yeah, it would have won even more comfortably if it wasn't for fire extinguishers going off in the car and stuff. But
yeah,
it provided a great watch. Am I right in saying we've got 3 more teams to cover? Alfa Romeo is the next one. The consistency is probably the best word to describe them this year. They're keeping Kimi Räikkönen and Antonio Giovinazzi. Do you think that will just help the team for one more year with them 2 drivers and to sort of carry them over through the season, and then go back next year with maybe 2 Ferrari junior drivers in there?
I think Alfa Romeo, they're not going to be fighting for scrapping for those last podium places. But they're going to be consistent again. I mean, last year they were consistently scoring points. This year, I think it's more of the same. And I mean, I don't need to say about Raikkonen. We all know how good he is, even though it may just be his hobby. But Raikkonen is he's a fantastic driver. The experience he has, the way he conducts himself, I just think it's brilliant. Because I think Giovinazzi's learning shed loads. The sad thing is I don't see a future for Giovinazzi in Ferrari. I can't see him getting there. I don't know about you. But yeah, I think Alfa Romeo are in for a solid season.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. In terms of Giovinazzi, I think the only reason he's got that seat is because they want an Italian driver, and if that is going to be the case going forward, and they can't have Giovinazzi, it could mean either Matteo Nannini or Alessio Deleta could be getting that seat, which might be a bit of a worry. But I think what Alfa Romeo, the way they join most laps, consistency is key there, and I think they'll make a step forward if Ferrari's engine has improved, because I think going back very briefly to the Ferrari engine problems, it wasn't so much that just the Ferrari's works team that was struggling. It was in lap times that all the Ferrari powered teams dropped back, and I think if their engine has improved, it will help Alfa Romeo maybe push forward a little bit, and obviously their own development. So they'll definitely not be fighting for wins, and I can't see them fighting for podiums. But I think definitely them 8th, 9th, 10th place on a good day for them, I could definitely see them there. I think. Do you think maybe Kimi could be just past his best now and might get bored halfway through the season if he is thinking about retirement?
What, and if he'll leave mid-season?
No, if he'll just get bored halfway through and not really focus and just take it as a pure hobby and just drive around the back of the grid just to see out his contract?
No, I don't think so. Kimi's a racer. You don't turn up and risk your life doing what these guys do just for the sake of it. You race to finish as high as possible. And I think we saw that last year with Kimi, and I think we'll see it again with him this year, that he loves doing it. He loves F1 and he loves racing. And I think it's fantastic he's still thrashing it round on a Sunday afternoon. I think it's brilliant, and I'm looking forward to seeing him driving again this year, because he is one of the most skillful drivers on the grid. You saw that from the way he reacted to the Sainz incident on the last day of testing. Anyone else would have had a crash there, but Kimi quickly saw it coming, yoinked the wheel out of the way. He has a talent, and I think he's a world champion for a reason. And the more the merrier with world champions on the grid, I think. Got to keep them around for as long as possible.
I think in terms of Kimi, he'll get a bit of a wake-up call when he sees Mick Schumacher lining up on the grid alongside him. He's obviously driving with Haas this season, along with Nikita Mazepin, who very controversial figure, and I think he was joking about telling people to look at the onboard when he almost crashed into Hamilton during testing. But
yeah, that I didn't really. I thought FOM did him a little dirty there. I mean, we've not heard any team radio throughout the entirety of the test.
Apart from that one, yeah.
And they air that.
Yeah.
I thought that was a bit... But yeah, go on. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's an all-rookie lineup for Haas. Obviously, the end of last season was a bit of a struggle for them, because we always had the Grosjean crash, and then we knew the Grosjean and Magnussen weren't going to be continuing on, and then Pietro Fittipaldi had to come in, get settled in the team. It was a very disrupted end of the season. Do you think, in terms of an all-rookie lineup with a car that they've admitted that they didn't even spend their tokens to develop, do you think it's just going to be a really difficult season, and we'll be chatting this time next year with them being 10th in the grid?
I can see that, yeah. Sadly, I mean, Haas started so well, and it's just kind of slipped away, really. Because, yeah, the crash will have given them a lot of financial hardship last year. Obviously, the fact Grosjean got away from that is the big thing. But the thing is with Haas, they're not developing. The testing car was last year's car with a few changes. They're not going to develop the car at all this year. You've got to think, are they on their way out? Because what's the point in turning up if you're not going to develop? And obviously, not last year, the year before, and to an extent last year, they developed the car and it just seemingly got worse. So maybe sticking with the first race spec isn't a bad idea. But it is sad to see Haas and the struggles they're having. I think we'll be lucky to have them on the grid this time next year, which is a sad thing to say.
Yeah, I think that maybe the only way I could see them is if Nikita Mazepin's father buys them out completely, which I don't know if F1 will allow that or whatever, but there's also rumours of everyone's favourite sponsor, Rich Energy, coming back in. But could, could you see them making a return to Formula One with Haas, the team that potentially really damaged probably both teams' reputations in some ways? Do you think that Rich Energy are on the way back, or do you think that's just a marketing campaign by
No,
Williams'
it's
story?
purely a marketing campaign. There is no way they have the money to get into F1 or to come back to F1. No, I think that's. I mean, kudos to William's story and his mad marketing, but I think they're out of the sport for good now. I think everyone kind of saw through that thin veil, and not being funny, it didn't shine a good light on Formula One. It made them all look a bit stupid, really.
Yeah, I think if they come back, they'll either need some very definite payment up front or something like that, because we can't have another situation where your team's title sponsor leaves the grid halfway through the season. It would be a nightmare for them. One final team, a team that I think could be definitely ahead of Haas this season, it's Williams. They've kept George Russell, which I think is probably as good of an upgrade to them as anything they can put on the car, and Nicholas Latifi, who now in the second season will have his rookie year out of the way, so he can have something to reflect and look back on. Craig, do you think Russell staying with Williams is a big deal, and do you think that will really help the team in terms of trying things to maybe push forward?
I think the problem that they've got with the whole Russell scenario is Claire Williams was adamant he was staying. She said no to him going to Mercedes this year. Then they left. So Russell's got to do that other year. I think it won't help either party, but I think to me it's just annoying we're not getting Russell in that Merc, because he showed what he could do in Bahrain last year. That is the most annoying thing here for me. I think Russell should have been in that Merc this year, and the fact he's not, and he's going to be spend another season poodling around at the back of the grid, it's annoying, because as a fan we want to see him up there. But it's going to be. I think Williams have made big steps forward this year. I reckon they're not. I don't think they're going to be the slowest. I think that falls to Haas, and I think they could challenge for maybe scraps for scraps of points. I'm not sure if you agree with me on that, but no, it's nice to see Williams getting out of the rut they've been in for the past few seasons, really. And not only that, the car, when it first came out, as you mentioned, I thought, oh, it's a bit naff. Saw it out on track, I thought, yeah, that's interesting. I like that.
I think probably the way Williams are going, they've obviously got new owners, new CEO, but this season they very much kept things as they were, and it's really just them to sort of see where the team's at, sort of over the course of a season. I think next year we could see them potentially letting go of the likes of Roy Nissany in the junior program, and maybe even Nicholas Latifi, because if they're financially they're okay without them, could we see someone like Jack Aitken maybe coming back in, or even the likes of Nico Hulkenberg, or maybe even a Valtteri Bottas coming back down if Russell goes up, because they might be able to afford that.
I can see Bottas going back to Williams. That to me is the logical play for Bottas and Williams. I can see that happening. I can definitely see Bottas going back to Williams to help them continue the build of that car.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, and we'll all line up. That would be Nico Hulkenberg and Valtteri Bottas fighting in the Williams. That'd be very interesting, but I don't think that'll ever be the case. So that is all the teams sort of rounded up from testing, with a few sort of rumours out here or there. We're going to move on to some predictions now for the first race of the season in Bahrain. I think this year we're actually going to have to track them, because we sort of forgot what predictions we made at the end of last season. We've probably already touched on this, but Craig, who do you think will be the fastest team come Bahrain?
I think it's going to be Mercedes. I think they were heavily sandbagging during testing, and I think would be silly to write them off. So I'm going to say Mercedes is still going to be the fastest team over the course of the weekend.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think what we'll see is Mercedes sandbagging Q1, Q2, and then Q3 coming out and being the second faster than anyone else, and we're all going another season with this. If we think Mercedes are the fastest, do you think either driver would be on pole, and if so, which one?
It's going to be Hamilton again. I think last year was the strongest season he'd ever had, and I think he's just too good at the minute. Hamilton, he's at the peak, and I think he is at his peak. Last year was fantastic. I think he'll carry it through to this. I think he's going to be hard to beat again this year. He's going to be incredibly hard to stop on his way to that 8th title. And I think if you're going to have to beat him, it's going to be a titanic battle if you do want to beat him.
I'm going to make a bold prediction here and go for Valtteri Bottas, because we've seen the last few seasons the impressive start he made to the season. I don't think he'll be able to sustain it throughout the season, but I could see Bottas starting in pole. So if Hamilton's going to win for you, who will finish in second and third in the race? That's pole position. Hamilton might not win. What's your top 3 for the race?
Top 3 for the race is I don't know. I think it's so close. Hamilton, Verstappen, Perez, I think.
Yeah, but not a bad shout there. I'm going to go for Hamilton to win, Verstappen in second, and go Daniel Ricciardo for third, because why not? It's worth a shout. Who do you think, final prediction, who do you think would be the biggest, or what team, driver, just find that will surprise you the most come Bahrain?
Hopefully McLaren and Alpine. I think should there be a little kerfuffle between the front two, McLaren are going to pick up that third podium. I think that third podium spot, and I'd love to see it. I really would love to see it. But do I have to pick one?
You can go for both if you want, but
I'll go for both.
Both for one, and if I had to push you for one,
probably McLaren. I think they're going to be strong this year.
I'm going to go for a double points finish for AlphaTauri, because we love Gasly.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
Yeah, it's as possible. I think I'll even add to it, Gasly P6. There we go.
Ooh, getting really specific now.
Yeah, because we tried that last year, and I don't think any of us got any predictions correct.
Nope.
Which was a bit of a worry, but yeah, I think that is going to bring to the end of this podcast. Craig, thank you so much for joining me for this one. It's great to have you back on the channel. Just have you got any final thoughts going ahead to Bahrain?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me on again and listening to me ramble on. And I think we're in for a great season. I can't wait for it to get started. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an exciting season. We'll, of course, be covering it across our social media, our YouTube channel, and our new website, which we've relaunched. Spent a bit of time trying to make it as nice as possible for all you. So if you want to check it out, it's theapexmotorsport.com. We'll, of course, have these podcasts up on all your usual podcast platforms, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple, and whatever else we can put it up on. So yeah, thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you, or not to see you, but we'll be here for you to listen to for the next podcast, which will be after the Bahrain Grand Prix. So thank you all so much for listening. We hope to see you all next time. Goodbye.